Chapter 21 of The Beautiful Mrs. Davenant by Violet Tweedale. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 21. Warburton's Task. Ambrose Warburton was smoking his pipe after early celebration and breakfast. The sun was shining brightly into his study. A slight fall of snow had taken place during the night, but the storm had passed over, and the day promised to be a perfect winter one of hard frost and cloudless sky. He opened the morning paper and glanced down at its contents, but before he could be immersed in the latest labour worry, the door opened, and his sister entered. "This note has just been sent up from Little Glentworth. It's marked immediate." Ambrose took it, and saw with a little thrill of pleasure that the handwriting was Miss Howard's.
Let's see what she says. Is anyone waiting?"
"Yes, a garden boy. He says there's an answer." Emily walked to the window and picked a few dead leaves from some geraniums growing there. She wheeled round on hearing a perplexed exclamation from her brother.
"There, you may read what she says. It isn't marked private, and she seems to have no secrets from you," he said, handing her the note. "What do you make of it?"
"Something terrible has happened to Hilda. Will you come to see us as soon as you possibly can? In desperate need of your advice, Agnes." Emily folded the paper and laid it in front of him. She was suddenly and deeply perturbed with a sense of impending calamity. "When will you go? This is something very urgent," she asked gravely. Ambrose was already drawing writing materials towards him. He glanced at his watch.
"Oh, at 10:30, he muttered, scribbling rapidly.
There was a silence between them for a moment or two whilst his pen flew on. A knock sounded at the door, and Emily went forward and opened it. The little maid-servant stood outside, with a scared expression on her chubby face. "Please, miss, Mr. Thorpe of the Lake House is dead, and Jones has come to tell the vicar." Ambrose had raised his head as certain words fell upon his ear.
"What's that?"
he called out sharply. Emily signed to the girl to go away and close the door again. "Jones from the Lake House has come to tell you that Mr. Thorpe is dead. Perhaps—" she hesitated a moment— "perhaps the note and this unexpected news have some connection."
"How could they?" he answered abruptly.
He was staring in front of him in a perplexed manner. Was something big and terrible coming at last into his uneventful life? "I feel there is a vital connection." He grasped the purport rather than the words she uttered. He was conscious of a similar sensation, though he did not say so.
"Ask Jones to come in here at once."
Emily found the garden boy from Little Glentworth, Jones, and the maid in low but excited confabulation. She dispersed the little gathering by conducting Jones to the study and closing the door.
"What's this I hear?" asked Ambrose, after a quick good morning.
"Mr. Thorpe, he died at dawn. Got a chill, so Mrs. Greatrix says. I only seed him well yester morning, but Steve, that be the watchdog, was howling something fearful in the evening, and I heard him again in the night," stated the gnome emphatically.
"Didn't you know Mr. Thorpe was ill, and was no doctor called in?"
questioned Ambrose. Jones shook his head. "A queer thing did happen about 8 o'clock. Miss Letty rapped at my door and gave orders from Mr. Thorpe to take a letter immediate to Ann Binns, the postmistress. I did as I were bid. It were a fine moon night and hard frost. It were addressed Postmistress, Great Glentworth, and marked immediate, and the writing were Miss Letty's. Anyway, it weren't Mr. Thorpe's. I weren't inside the lake house after 10 yesterday morning, when I took in wood and coal, and I were working after dinner in the gardens right away from the house. I heard Steve clear enough. This morning at 8 o'clock, Mrs. Greatrix said to me, 'Mr. Thorpe died of a chill at dawn. Go and ask your wife to come and lay him out.'" The gnome paused to observe the effect his statement was having upon the vicar. He had reason to be satisfied. Ambrose was listening to him and looking at him with profound interest and attention.
"Were you told to come here?"
"Oh, no, vicar, I weren't, but I thought as how you ought to know, seeing that Miss Letty's all alone." A gleam of lively sympathy sprang into the vicar's eyes.
"You are perfectly right, Jones. I thank you. Is that all you have to tell me?"
"That's all, sir. I haven't seen Miss Letty, and I knows Sarah Greatorex ain't company for any one. Turned her back on me, she did, after giving her orders."
"Well, Jones, go now to the kitchen and wait there. I'll give you a note to take to Miss Letty, which you must try to deliver into her own hand."
Jones pulled his forelock and departed, and Ambrose and Emily looked at one another.
"Strange, unexpected news, which may have great tragedy lurking beneath, coming hard on the heels of this note."
He tapped Miss Howard's appeal significantly.
"I begin to agree with you. There's a connection. I'll go at once to Little Glentworth, and then on to the lake house, and try to probe events."
"And I will go and prepare a room for Letty. You will bring her back with you. Harry will certainly arrive some time to-day. He shall have a room also. He may prefer to come here rather than remain in that desolate house," Emily announced briskly. Ambrose looked at her thoughtfully. She was a great help to him with her ready grasp and quick intuitions.
"Right. We may take it as a certainty that Letty will be with us to-night. Meanwhile, I need hardly say to you, be discreet, dear. Wait 1 second while I write the notes."
She sat down and waited silently, while her mind worked rapidly. Mr. Thorpe dead? Harry was now master of the Lake House property, and Letty would very soon be mistress there. Probably the note she took to Jones and bade him deliver was a telegram to summon him. Why any mystery? Why had she not told Jones that her uncle was ill? She must have known of his illness at that hour, and what had caused such a sudden collapse? Geoffrey Thorpe didn't go out. What had caused his chill? Emily hated mystery. Her nature was extremely frank and open. Now she felt uneasy and uncomfortably excited.
"There are the 2 notes, one for Miss Howard, the other for Letty. See that they're delivered as soon as possible. I'll take my bike and be at Little Glentworth almost as soon as the boy," said Ambrose, breaking in on her anxious reflections. Afterwards Ambrose wondered what had made him go first to Little Glentworth. Surely it would have been more natural to visit the house of death and the lonely Letty before obeying that imperious call for help emanating from Miss Howard. He was shown immediately into Mrs. Davenant's boudoir, where he found both ladies. They welcomed him with a totally unusual gravity and preoccupation, and he sensed tragedy in their atmosphere. "Sit down by the fire. What we have to tell you will take some time," said Agnes gravely. "We are going to confide absolutely in you, because we both have a deep sense of your trustworthiness and sound judgment. Firstly, I warn you that what we have to say is of a startling and terrible nature." Warburton betrayed no surprise. He had come with the expectation of receiving startling disclosures. "I am to be depended upon so far as keeping your confidence is concerned. As to my sound judgment, well, I can only do my best to merit your trust," he replied quietly. "Tell me bald facts first, please. We can fill in detail after."
"Last night, about 4:30, Mr. Thorpe of the Lake House murdered a man called Mark Thorpe, who was my husband." It was Hilda who spoke. Her words were cold and clear. They seemed to fall from her pale lips like drops of ice. She looked not at him, but straight before her into the middle of the room. He slowly repeated her words, one by one, in silence to himself. What did they mean? He sat leaning his head on his hand, watching her intently. She seemed perfectly composed, though she was very pale, and bore evidence of suffering under some great strain. Perhaps she had never looked more beautiful than now, wrapped in a dead white cashmere shawl and devoid of all ornament.
"Will you give me as briefly as possible your evidence for this accusation?" he asked gently.
"I was present on the border of the lake when the crime was committed. Though I did not see it actually done, I heard it, and saw both murderer and murdered. When Geoffrey Thorpe turned to creep home alone, I confronted him in his streaming garments. I demanded to know what he had done with Mark Thorpe. His reply was, "I have drowned him." My husband only had one arm, and was therefore at a serious disadvantage in a conflict, even with a much older man. I went afterwards to the spot where the murder had taken place. It was easily found because of the trampled ground and broken ice. I saw nothing, I heard nothing more, though I remained on the bank some time. There was not a ripple on the surface of the big hole torn in the ice. It must be frozen over again by now. I came to the conclusion that life was extinct, and that Mark Thorpe lay dead at the bottom. Then I got home somehow. I hardly know how. I was utterly spent.
How did this man, Mark Thorpe, whom you say to be your husband, come to be in the neighbourhood?
Warburton spoke after a long silence, during which he strove to assimilate her terrible statements. They seemed to him as the dreams of insanity. I can't answer that question. I can only offer the supposition that either he was kept concealed in the lake house, or he made a sudden dramatic appearance there. I was married to him in the United States 14 years ago. We could not live together. At one time I had reason to believe he was dead. Then I received a letter purporting to be from him, saying he had lost an arm in a shipwreck. This letter I received 6 years ago. We have never met again since we parted in America until last night, when we stood face to face. The recognition was mutual. He was the real owner of the lake house property. Now what is to be done to Geoffrey Thorpe, who has murdered him in order to retain his hold on the lands which were never his? Ambrose Warburton answered the tragic question very quietly.
The Almighty has already made reply. Geoffrey Thorpe died this morning at dawn.
The pale tragedy of her face did not change. For hours she had been feeling with all the intensity possible to her deep nature. This new development didn't even astonish her. She made no answer, and Ambrose fell into deep thought, out of which the women did not seek to rouse him. What wild, improbable fantasy was this story he had listened to, he asked himself. Yet he knew it was true. He thought of the idle babblings he had so often heard as to the mystery surrounding Mrs. Davenant and Agnes Howard. And as so continuously happens in this world, the reality was infinitely stranger and more poignant than any fiction emanating from the imagination of man. He knew he was now called upon to bear an enormous responsibility. He felt the weight of it already, and showed it in his face and voice when he spoke again.
Before offering any opinion or taking any action, I must think over the revelations I have heard from you. They must be weighed, and much doubtless remains to be added to them. I am going from here straight to the lake house to see Letty. I must also see Harry Thorpe, who will surely arrive to-day. You must give me permission to confide to Harry all that you have told me.
You will have to tell both Harry and Letty, said Agnes decidedly. Hilda has no desire to make any mystery or hide the truth. We leave matters entirely in your hands. Please use your own discretion. We're both rather anxious about Letty, the more so now that we know the old man is dead.
I will bring her back to the vicarage with me, answered Warburton, and then he briefly related the little he knew of the old man's death.
What was obscure had now become clear. Geoffrey Thorpe had not long survived the conflict and the submersion in the icy water of the lake. The hand of man had been baulked of its prey, but the hand of God had stricken him down with merciless rapidity and severity.
I must ask you for the loan of your car to-day, went on Warburton. Let it be at the lake house in an hour, and I will try to find time to see you again this evening. Now I must go and see Letty. I will do my best for all concerned, but I require time and quiet to think out this awful tragedy. One most important admonition I leave with you both. Be silent, and admit no outsiders."
"We will abide by your advice. I'm hardly in a condition to receive callers," replied Mrs. Davenant bitterly. "Believe me, we realise to the full the difficulties lying ahead, and the terrible responsibility we are asking you to bear. But both Agnes and I feel you are the only soul in this world we can turn to in this crisis, the only man in whom we can place implicit confidence and trust." At any other time such an assurance would have brought great happiness. It would have proved to him that his ministry was not all in vain. But now so great was his perturbation of mind that he scarcely grasped the purport of her words. His thoughts were already concentrating on that other interview awaiting him at the lake-house, and he shook hands hurriedly and took his departure. When left alone, the two women sat silent for many minutes, wrapped in thought. Hilda lay back in her chair with closed eyes. She had not slept all night, and looked utterly exhausted. Agnes had sat up with her, and looked scarcely less fatigued. She bent over her friend and kissed her gently. "Try to rest now, Hilda. I'm going to get a breath of air in the garden." Mrs. Davenant opened her eyes to meet those bending over her. "Do not let us forget, Agnes, that the worst part of this miserable tragedy has still to be told." Warburton mounted his bicycle and rode away through the hard, frozen, thin coating of snow that was spread over the country. The sun shone brilliantly in a cloudless sky, but the vicar was in no humour to enjoy the beauties of nature. He was profoundly agitated by the startling events which had so abruptly stirred the pool of his quiet life. He felt how great was his responsibility, holding as he now did such tragic secrets. Would they remain secrets, or be blazoned to the world? With horror he thought of the press gloating over a new and thrilling series of sensations. As to his own part in the drama of events, he could form no conjecture. There was so much he must still learn in order to fill in gaps and present to his mind a clear sequence of the tragedy. Harry must at once be told the truth, so far as he knew it. Letty it might be possible to spare, yet surely she must suspect something of what had actually occurred. Consumed by anxious thoughts, he reached the gates of the lake-house, and stopped to draw breath and look about him. There was no sound. The silence of snow was all about him, stretching white seas, a wave-like procession of hidden furrows fading into continual white foam. The faint howling of a dog called him back to life again, and he stared about him with deep interest as he proceeded slowly along the unkept drive. When the old black and white timbered house rose suddenly up before him, involuntarily he uttered an exclamation of utter surprise. Its dilapidated grimness was veiled beneath a glittering mantle of purest white, and long sparkling icicles dropped from and draped the lead pipes and eaves. A fairy palace stood before him in place of the gloomy abode of death and abominable crime. He passed round to the back door, throwing a kind word to Steve, who was barking violently. Letty had told him that in winter the front of the house was kept closed, and seeing no one about, he opened the door and walked in. A long stone-flagged passage lay before him, and traversing its length he found himself in a square hall, onto which several doors opened. As he stood uncertainly looking about him, one of the doors opened and Mrs. Greatorex confronted him. He bade her good day quietly. "I have come to see Miss Thorne. I am aware that Mr. Thorpe is dead," he explained. She had not spoken yet, and he saw a dull red rise over her sallow face. "I admit no one into this house. Mr. Harry Thorpe has not arrived, and until he does, I am mistress here," she retorted defiantly. Prepared as he was for unpleasantness should they meet, her rough attitude took him by surprise. He had not anticipated anything quite so forbidding as this. "I am afraid that I must dispute that claim of yours, Mrs. Greatorex. You have never been mistress here," he returned, quietly but very decidedly. His cool attitude appeared to infuriate her. "How
dare you dispute my claim?" she demanded, approaching nearer to him menacingly. "Perhaps it may satisfy you to learn that I am the dead man's widow. I am Mrs. Geoffrey Thorpe. Now, begone with you. When Harry Thorpe takes possession, he can do as he pleases, but until he arrives, my authority here is supreme." She gave a movement of her arms, as if to sweep him off the premises, but he stood his ground. Her assertion astounded him, but he did not show it. The day had brought him so many shocks, and her truculence sharpened his wits. How thankful he was now that his first visit had been paid to Mrs. Davenant. His eyes lost their seriousness and were bright with defiance, but he possessed great self-control as well as determination. He meant to take his own way, but he intended to gain it, if possible, by peaceable means. "It is quite immaterial to me who you are, Mrs. Greatorex or Mrs. Thorpe, but I must demand that you confine yourself to facts. You have never been mistress here, nor has Geoffrey Thorpe ever been master here, for the simple reason that the real owner was alive until last night." The effect of his words was even greater than he anticipated. She threw her hand across her mouth as if to arrest a scream, and her face blanched to the pallor of death. Her black eyes, riveted on his face, were terror-stricken. "Go back to your room and remain there," he commanded sternly. "Your crime has yet to be dealt with." Without glancing at her again, he struck off through another corridor to the right, which he trusted might lead him to Letty. At the far end of it he saw her standing, awaiting him. "Oh, I hoped it was you. I heard Steve barking," she cried in a broken voice, as she ran to meet him with outstretched hands. She guided him to the empty living-room, where Geoffrey Thorpe's papers still littered the table at which for so many years he had sat. The white reflection from without searched the dark corners and lit up the portrait of Mark Thorpe, who now lay drowned at the bottom of the lake. It seemed to Letty that the expression had changed to one almost of contemptuous triumph. "I gained my liberty at last," he seemed to say, "such liberty as none can ever deprive me of again." They sat down side by side on a couch, and it was with deep distress he noted the ravages made upon her face by the ordeal she had been through. As he looked at her, he had no doubt that she knew all there was to be known. He noted also that her condition of strained nervousness and tense mentality made her afraid of every word she uttered. "You look desperately tired," he said gently. "Have you had any sleep?" He saw fear creep into her eyes, and she let them fall upon the restless hands in her lap. "No, I couldn't sleep. I sat up all night with Uncle." "Where was Mrs. Greatorex?" "I suppose in bed," was the confused reply. "You see, Uncle wouldn't have her near him." "Or a doctor, either," suggested Warburton. "Had he any idea of his danger?" "Oh, yes. He knew that he was dying." She was twisting her shaking fingers in her handkerchief, and seemed on the verge of tears. He felt the strong necessity of relieving the tension and putting her at ease. Now she was in an agony of fear lest she commit herself by word or gesture. "I want you to remember, dear Letty, that the clergyman is used to receiving the most private confidences, and that I am to be absolutely trusted with anything you may have to tell me. Believe me, I can help you. As no doctor was called in, directly Harry arrives he will send for Williams to certify as to the cause of death. That must be done, and I wish you to promise that from Harry you will keep back no detail, however small. There must be no secret locked up in your breast under the belief that loyalty to the dead demands silence. The dead belong to God, not to man." She was staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. "Secret? What secret do you suspect?" she whispered thickly. "I know what you feel to be the most terrible secret. The crime that brought about your uncle's death," he returned gravely. "No matter for the moment how I know it. Does Mrs. Greatorex know what killed Geoffrey Thorpe?"
She was agonized, but her sincere soul threw subterfuge most thankfully aside. Her heart quailed on learning that another shared her secret, yet his words brought her enormous relief. The barrier was down. "I don't know. We haven't spoken together, but I think she must suspect. She is aware that uncle came back streaming with water, and she knows that the other man is no longer in the house," she faltered.
"Did you know who this man was, Letty?"
She looked round at him with a flash of surprise. "No, how could I know who he was? I didn't know a man was hidden here, though I felt something terrible in the atmosphere of the house. Now I do know who he was, for uncle confessed to me during the endless, terrible night. He said that his prisoner must have pretended to be weaker than he really was. He had not expected him to attempt to escape. He has written a full confession, which I have got safely hidden away."
Warburton breathed a sigh of intense relief. "That will be a document more closely concerning Harry than anyone else," he said. "What time do you expect him?"
She told him of the urgent telegram she had sent the night before, and the reply which Jones had brought back from the post-office. Harry would arrive at 1 o'clock.
"I will wait here to receive him, and I will take you back with me to the vicarage. Needless to say, you can't remain here," was Warburton's kindly rejoinder. "Though Harry is now the actual owner of the Lake House property, there will be many difficulties to settle. One of those difficulties has been definitely disposed of since I entered this house, Letty. I refer to Mrs. Greatrex, who claims to be mistress here until Harry arrives."
"Oh, that's no new attitude," returned Letty. "She always has been mistress here."
"Yet without a shadow of claim," sternly retorted the vicar. "Now, if you will think for a moment, you will realise that even Geoffrey Thorpe had no real claim to be master. How could he have a claim while Mark Thorpe lived? For a very few hours he was legally master, literally between sunset and dawn. With his death, his brief tenure passed to Harry. Had you any conception that your uncle had married Mrs. Greatrex?" The speechless amazement on her face convinced him that she had known nothing of this, and he proceeded. "I have effectually silenced her for the time being, by bringing home to her that she was accessory to the crime of imprisoning the actual owner of the Lake House, of usurping his functions, and appropriating his revenues. Harry will deal with her as he thinks best. I have told you of this new disclosure only in order to assure you that you may meanwhile act as authority here, and as Harry's deputy. Make any preparation you choose for his comfort on arrival, and Jones will take your orders now, and assist you in any way. My advice to you is, treat Mrs. Greatrex, or Mrs. Thorpe, which she claims to be, exactly as if she did not exist. There must be many little domestic matters to arrange, such as provisioning the house, which she will certainly no longer attend to, and which will be necessary to Harry's comfort during the next few days. And you must call in help, for Mrs. Thorpe will be in no humour to go about her ordinary household duties. A room ought to be prepared for Harry to use if he chooses. He will have an enormous amount of work to do. Will you undertake to act at once as mistress here?" As he spoke, he saw with satisfaction the effect his words were having upon her. She was beginning to grasp the real situation. Out of a lethargy of shock and horror, she was rousing herself to attend to duty and rise to the emergency. Her mind would thus be distracted from tragedy and turned into healthy and useful channels. When he rose to go and look his last upon the dead Geoffrey Thorpe, she rose also with purposeful energy, eager to carry out his instructions and suggestions, and make preparation for the arrival of her lover. End of chapter 21.